The rain fell like bullets on the hood of the Black Mercedes, each drop exploding in tiny bursts of water that reflected the neon lights of Seoul's most expensive district. Inside the vehicle, silence reigned absolute, the kind of silence that followed violence, that accompanied power, that demanded respect without a single word spoken. Kang Junseo stepped out into the downpour, his tailored black suit absorbing the rain as if darkness itself could repel water. Behind him, the high-rise building where he just concluded negotiations stood like a monument to excess, all glass and steel and money that never stopped flowing. The negotiation had been brutal in its efficiency. 3 men had entered that conference room thinking they had leverage. None of them would make that mistake again. His guards flanked him immediately, 2 shadows in matching suits, their hands hovering near concealed weapons out of habit rather than necessity. Who would dare attack Kang Junseo in his own territory? Who would be foolish enough to challenge the man whose name alone could silence a room, whose reputation for cold calculation had built an empire on the bones of those who'd underestimated him? The car door stood open, waiting. 5 more steps and he'd be inside, dry, moving on to the next piece of business that required his attention. The city never slept, and neither did the machinery of power that he'd spent 15 years constructing with methodical precision. 4 steps. 3. Then he heard it, small feet splashing through puddles, running with the desperate urgency of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Please." The voice cut through the rain like a knife through silk, high-pitched, young, terrified. Junseo's hand went up instinctively, freezing his guards mid-motion as they moved to intercept. He turned, rainwater streaming down his face, and found himself looking down at a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. Her clothes were soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her skull, and her eyes, those eyes were enormous in her small face, filled with tears that had nothing to do with the rain. She grabbed his leg with both hands, her small fingers digging into the expensive fabric of his trousers with surprising strength. "Please," she sobbed again, her whole body shaking. "They're hurting my mummy. Please, please help. Nobody else will help, please." One of his guards stepped forward. "Boss, I'll handle." Junseo raised his hand higher, sharper. The guard froze. Something ancient and long-buried shifted in Junseo's chest as he stared down at this child who'd run toward the most dangerous man in 6 city blocks, who'd grabbed onto a monster and begged for salvation. Her eyes held no recognition of what he was, no understanding of the bodies he'd left in his wake, the empires he'd crushed, the fear his name inspired. She saw only someone who might help. Those eyes, something about those eyes. "Where?" His voice came out rougher than intended, scraped raw by years of giving orders that ended lives. The girl's grip tightened on his leg. "The old building, the one with the broken sign," they said. "They said they'd hurt her if she didn't give them money, but we don't have money, we don't have anything." Her words tumbled out in a rush, punctuated by hiccuping sobs. "Please, I'll do anything, I'll be good forever. Just please help my mummy." Junseo looked at his guards. "Stay with the car." "Boss, I said stay." He looked down at the girl, whose eyes were still locked on his face with that desperate, drowning hope. "Show me." She released his leg and grabbed his hand instead, her small fingers wrapping around 2 of his like they were a lifeline. The touch sent a shock through his system. When was the last time someone had held his hand? When was the last time anyone had touched him without fear or calculation or the careful distance that power demanded? The girl pulled him toward a narrow alley between buildings, her bare feet splashing through puddles that reflected the neon signs overhead. Junseo followed, water soaking through his shoes, ruining leather that cost more than most people earned in a month. None of that mattered. Nothing mattered except the small hand in his and the inexplicable certainty that he couldn't walk away. They emerged from the alley into a rundown section of the district that the city's wealth had forgotten. The buildings here leaned inward like old men, their facades cracked and stained, windows dark or broken or covered with newspapers. The girl led him to the worst of them, a 4-story apartment building with scaffolding that looked decades old and a neon sign that buzzed and flickered, half its letters dead. Up there, she pointed to the 3rd floor, apartment 3B. From above, Juncio heard raised voices. A woman's cry cut short, male laughter, the sound of something breaking. His jaw tightened. "Stay here." "No," the girl's grip on his hand became desperate. "Don't leave me. What if they come down? What if they—" He knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, he could see every detail of her face, the tear tracks cutting through the grime on her cheeks, the trembling of her lower lip, the way her pupils were dilated with fear. And something else. Something in the shape of her eyes, the set of her jaw, that pulled at a memory he'd spent 15 years trying to bury. "Listen to me." His voice came out softer than he'd known he could make it. "I need you to be brave for a few more minutes. Can you do that?" She nodded, still trembling. "Hide in that doorway." He pointed to a recessed entrance a few meters away. "If anyone comes who isn't me or your mother, you run. Don't look back, just run. Understand?" Another nod, more certain this time. "Good girl." The words felt strange in his mouth, unfamiliar. He stood, releasing her hand, and felt the absence of her touch like a physical loss. The girl ran to the doorway and pressed herself into the shadows. Junsi watched her disappear before turning toward the building's entrance. The door hung crooked on broken hinges. Inside, the stairwell smelled of mildew and human misery, the kind of poverty that had given up hopping for better. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his footsteps silent despite his size. 15 years of moving through dangerous spaces had taught him how to make himself into a ghost when necessary. On the 3rd floor landing, he heard the voices more clearly now. "Don't care about your excuses, bitch. Your husband borrowed 2,000,001. He disappeared. That makes it your debt now." "I don't have it." The woman's voice was strained, fighting to stay steady. "I've told you this every week for 3 months. I'm working double shifts. I'm giving you everything I can." "Everything you can isn't enough." A different male voice, younger, eager. "Maybe we need to find another way for you to pay. You're not bad looking, even if you are a little old. I bet we could find some men who'd—" The sound of a slap echoed into the hallway. The woman cried out. Juncio didn't knock. He simply pushed the door open. The apartment was tiny, one room that served as kitchen, living space and bedroom, with a door that probably led to a bathroom smaller than his closet. 3 men stood around a woman who'd been knocked to the floor. She was holding her face, her dark hair falling forward to hide the mark that was undoubtedly blooming there. The men wore cheap suits and cheaper cologne, the uniform of low-level thugs who thought muscle and cruelty made them powerful. They turned when the door opened. The first one, the oldest, started to speak. "This is private business. Get the fuck." Then he saw Juncio's face. The words died in his throat. "Boss Kang," the man's face went white. "We didn't. This isn't. We're just collecting a debt for—" "Who do you work for?" Juncio's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. That made it more terrifying. "Park Youngwoo," one of the others answered, his voice cracking. "But this is just standard collection, nothing to do with—" "Park Youngwoo." Juncio stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "One of Lee Min-ho's lieutenants, which means you're working for the East Side Brotherhood." The men exchanged glances, fear radiating off them like heat. They knew what this meant. Juncio's organization and the East Side Brotherhood had maintained a careful truce for 2 years, each staying in their territory, each respecting the boundaries. These men collecting debts in Juncio's district violated that agreement. "We didn't know this was your territory," the first man said quickly. "The woman's husband borrowed from us 6 months ago, before the territorial agreements were finalized. We're just finishing old business." Juncio looked at the woman on the floor. She was staring at him with recognition dawning in her eyes, recognition and something that looked like despair. She knew who he was, knew what he was, and she knew that his presence here meant her problems had just multiplied. "Leave," Junseo said quietly. The men hesitated. The youngest one, the one who'd suggested selling the woman, seemed to mistake the quiet tone for weakness. He reached toward his jacket, toward whatever weapon he kept there. Junseo moved. It was over in seconds. The first man went down with a broken nose, blood exploding across his cheap suit. The second folded around Junseo's fist in his solar plexus, all the air rushing out of his lungs. The third, the one who'd reached for a weapon, found his arm twisted behind his back, his face pressed into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. "I said leave." Junseo's voice hadn't risen above conversational volume. "When you report back to Park Youngwoo, tell him that Kang Junseo says this debt is paid. Tell him if I see any of you in my district again, I'll send you back to Lee Min-ho in pieces." He released the third man, who stumbled away clutching his arm. The three of them fled, their footsteps thundering down the stairs like frightened cattle. The door banged shut behind them. Silence fell over the tiny apartment, broken only by the sound of rain against the window and the woman's ragged breathing. Junseo turned to look at her. She'd managed to push herself up to sitting, her back against the wall, one hand still pressed to her cheek where the slap had landed. She was probably in her late 20s, with delicate features and eyes that held the kind of strength that came from surviving things that should have broken her. "You know who I am," he said, not a question. She nodded slowly. "Everyone knows who you are." "Then you know what my presence here means." "That I've traded one set of monsters for another." Her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "They wanted money. What do you want?" The question hit harder than it should have. What did he want? He'd followed a child into the rain without thinking, had climbed stairs toward violence that wasn't his business, had just declared protection over a woman he'd never met. None of this made sense. Kang Junseo didn't do this. He didn't interfere in domestic disputes. He didn't protect strangers. He certainly didn't let small children grab his hand and lead him into situations that had no strategic value. So what did he want? Before he could answer, the door burst open again. The little girl stood in the doorway, water still dripping from her hair, her eyes wild with fear. "Mummy." She ran past Junseo without a glance and threw herself into her mother's arms. The woman caught her, wrapping her up tight, pressing her face into the girl's wet hair. "Hana, baby, I told you to hide in the building." The woman's voice broke. "I told you not to come up here. What if those men?" "I brought help." Hana pulled back to look at her mother's face, her small hands framing the bruised cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. "I found him outside and he came and he made them leave." "Did he make them leave, Mummy? Did I do good?" The woman's eyes lifted to meet Junseo's over her daughter's head. In those eyes, he saw gratitude warring with fear, relief fighting with desperation, and underneath it all, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting alone for too long. "You did very good, baby." The woman's voice was thick with unshed tears. "You were so brave." Hana beamed, then turned to look at Junseo. Her smile faded slightly as she studied his face. "You look scary," she said with the brutal honesty of children. "But your eyes are sad. Why are your eyes sad?" The question punched through every defense Junseo had built over 15 years. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. How did you explain to a child that you'd spent so long being a monster that you'd forgotten what it felt like to be human? How did you tell her that the last time someone had looked at him the way she was looking at him now, without fear, with innocent trust, had been the day his world had ended? "Hana, don't bother the man." The woman stood, pulling her daughter up with her. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Kang. We're grateful, but please, just go. Forget you saw us. Forget this happened." "The debt," Junseo said. "How much did your husband owe?" "It doesn't matter. I don't want." "How much?" The woman's jaw tightened. 2 million won, plus 6 months of interest. They're calling it 5 million now. "A pittance." less than June's CEO spent on a single suit. But to this woman, in this apartment that barely qualified as shelter, it might as well have been 5 billion. "It's handled," he said. "I told them the debt is paid, they won't come back." "Why?" The woman's voice rose. "Why would you do that? What do you want from us?" "Mummy," Hannah looked between them, confused by her mother's tone. Juncio stared at the woman, at her daughter, at the tiny apartment that smelled of mildew and poverty and desperate survival. What did he want? He still didn't have an answer. He only knew that walking away felt impossible, that the thought of those men coming back made something violent and protective coil in his chest, that the little girl's hand in his had woken something he'd thought was dead forever. "Nothing," he finally said. "I want nothing from you. Nobody does something for nothing, not people like you." People like him, monsters. She was right to be afraid. He turned toward the door, needing to leave before the tightness in his chest became something he couldn't control. "Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone tonight." "Wait," the woman's voice stopped him. "Those men, they won't just accept this. Their boss, Lee Min-ho, he won't let this slide. Crossing territory, collecting old debts, it's all politics to people like you. This isn't over. You've just made it worse." Juncio looked back at her. "It's over, trust me." "I don't trust people like you." But her voice had softened slightly, confusion overtaking fear. "I don't understand why you helped us." He looked at Hannah, who was still watching him with those two wise eyes. "Neither do I." Then he left, walking back down the stairs into the rain that had never stopped falling. His guards were waiting by the car, tense and alert. They said nothing as he approached, asked no questions. That was the way of power. Your subordinates learned quickly not to question your actions, no matter how inexplicable. But as the car pulled away from the curb, Juncio looked back at the broken building, at the faint light from the third-floor window, and felt something shift in his carefully ordered world. The girl's words echoed in his mind. "Your eyes are sad." When was the last time anyone had looked at his eyes instead of away from them? When was the last time someone had seen past the monster to whatever was left of the man underneath? He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Kim, I need you to do something quietly." His second-in-command answered immediately. "Yes, boss." "Third floor, apartment 3B in the old building on Yongsan Street. There's a woman and a child there. I want 2 men watching that building at all times, unmarked, invisible. If anyone approaches that apartment with intent to harm, I want to know immediately." Appalled, "Understood, boss. Is there anything else?" Juncio almost said no. Then, "Find out everything about her husband. Name, debts, where he went, who he owed. I want a full report by morning." "Of course." He hung up and stared out at the rain-slicked streets of his city, his empire, his carefully constructed kingdom of power and fear. Somewhere in his chest, in the place where he'd buried his humanity 15 years ago, something was stirring, something dangerous, something that felt almost like hope. And in the darkness of the car, alone with his thoughts, Kang Juncio remembered another little girl with sad eyes, another promise of protection that he'd failed to keep, another life he'd watched slip away while he stood powerless and broken. He'd been 12 years old when his sister died. Her name had been Minjai, and she'd been 7, just about Hana's age. She'd had the same way of looking at him, the same absolute trust that he could fix anything, protect her from anything. She'd grabbed his hand with the same desperate strength when the men had come to their house, when their father's gambling debts had finally caught up with them. Juncio had fought. God, he'd fought. But he'd been 12 and small and weak, and they'd beaten him until he couldn't move, until he could only watch as they took Minjai to punish his father for money he didn't have. They'd found her body in the river 3 days later. He'd built his empire on the graves of everyone involved in her death. He'd become the monster that monsters feared. He'd made sure no one would ever be able to hurt him again, by making sure everyone was too terrified to try. but he'd never forgiven himself for being too weak to save her. The car drove through the night, carrying him toward his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its emptiness that no amount of luxury could fill. Somewhere behind them, in a broken building in a forgotten corner of his territory, a little girl was probably falling asleep thinking he was a hero. She was wrong, of course. He wasn't a hero. He was the man who turned his pain into power, his grief into violence, his humanity into a weapon. But maybe, just maybe, he could keep one small girl and her mother safe in a world that wanted to devour them. It wasn't redemption. It would never be redemption. But it was something. Over the following week, Jun Seo's world continued as it always had. He attended meetings where fortunes changed hands over handshakes and threats. He negotiated territorial agreements with smiles that never reached his eyes. He signed off on operations that would make his organization richer and his enemies poorer. The machinery of power rolled on, efficient and merciless. But every evening, he received a report about apartment 3B. The woman's name was Yoon Jae-woo. Her husband, Yoon Tae-hyun, had borrowed money from the East Side Brotherhood to cover medical bills for Jae-woo's mother, who died anyway. He'd run 6 months ago, disappearing into the city's underground where men went when they couldn't face what they owed. Jae-woo had been left with the debt, the daughter, and a job cleaning office buildings that paid barely enough to keep them fed. The report mentioned that Jae-woo had moved to Seoul from Busan 3 years ago. It listed her education, stopped after high school to work. It documented her shifts, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. It noted with clinical precision that she visited a free clinic once a month for medication for some chronic condition the report didn't specify. What the report didn't say was whether she smiled, whether she sang to her daughter, whether she ever let herself cry, or if she trained herself to be strong every moment because breaking down was a luxury she couldn't afford. Jun Seo found himself wondering anyway. On the 8th day, his second-in-command Kim entered his office looking troubled. "Boss, we have a situation." Jun Seo looked up from the contracts he'd been reviewing. "Speak." "It's about the woman, Jae-woo. She figured out she was being watched." "How?" "She's smart. She noticed the same faces in the neighborhood. Yesterday she walked right up to one of our men and told him to tell his boss that she didn't ask for protection and doesn't want it." Jun Seo felt something that might have been amusement if he'd still been capable of that emotion. "What else?" "She said," Kim hesitated. "She said she'd rather take her chances with the loan sharks than owe anything to someone like you." There it was again. Someone like you, a monster. She wasn't wrong. "Keep the men in place," Jun Seo said. "Maintain distance. She doesn't get a choice about being protected." Kim nodded and left. Jun Seo turned his chair to face the window, looking out over the city that bent to his will. But his mind was in a cramped apartment where a proud woman was refusing help, because accepting it would mean owing something to a man she rightly feared. He should let her have her pride. He should withdraw the protection and let her face her life on her own terms. That would be the respectful thing to do. But respect was a luxury for people who had choices. Jae-woo might think she'd rather face loan sharks alone, but Jun Seo knew what happened to women with debts they couldn't pay in a city that ate the weak. He'd built his empire on that knowledge. He'd weaponized that cruelty. And he found that he wouldn't let it touch her or her daughter. That night, he did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He went to the apartment building himself, alone, without guards or weapons or any of the trappings of power that usually surrounded him. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and knocked on door 3B. Jae-woo answered, her expression shifting from wariness to shock to anger in the space of a heartbeat. "You. May I come in?" "No, say whatever you came to say from there." Behind her, Jun Seo could see Hana sitting at a tiny table, drawing with crayons on the back of what looked like advertising flyers. The girl looked up and her face brightened. "It's the sad eyes man. Mummy, can he come in? I want to show him my picture. Hana, go to the bathroom and wash up for bed. But mummy. Now baby. The girl's face fell, but she obeyed, casting one last curious look at Junseo before disappearing through the bathroom door. Jaiwoo stepped into the hallway and pulled the door mostly closed behind her. Up close, Junseo could see the circles under her eyes, the way she held herself with rigid control, as if relaxing for even a moment would mean collapse. I told your men I don't want to be followed, she said quietly. I know. I don't want your protection. I know that too. Then why are you here? Why was he here? Standing in a hallway that smelled of other people's cooking and broken dreams, looking at a woman who wanted nothing to do with him, who saw him for exactly what he was. I can't explain it, he said finally. I wish I could, but I can't just walk away. Yes, you can, you're Kang Junseo. You do whatever you want, walk away, forget us, we'll survive, we always have. Survival isn't enough. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Says the man who lives in a penthouse and drives cars that cost more than I'll earn in 10 years. You don't know anything about survival. You're wrong. The words came out harder than he intended. Everything I have, everything I am, I built from survival, from being the weak one, from watching someone die because I wasn't strong enough to protect them. Jaiwoo's eyes widened slightly. Is that what this is? Some kind of guilt complex? You couldn't save whoever it was, so now you're trying to save us. Maybe. He'd never been this honest with anyone in 15 years. Would that be so terrible? Yes. Her voice rose, then dropped quickly as she remembered her daughter in the next room. Yes, because we're not your redemption project. We're people. We have dignity. And accepting help from someone like you, from the things you do, the life you lead, it taints us. Can't you understand that? I understand that you're proud. I understand that you want to do this alone. But pride won't keep those men from coming back. Pride won't pay your debts or keep your daughter safe for. Don't, Jaiwoo's voice cracked. Don't you dare use my daughter to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating you. I'm telling you the truth. Your husband borrowed from dangerous people. Those people have organizations, bosses, reputations to maintain. The debt won't disappear just because you want it to. And what's your solution? I owe you instead. I become indebted to someone even more dangerous. You owe me nothing. I want nothing from you. Everyone wants something. Then maybe I'm not everyone. They stared at each other in the hallway, an impossible gulf between them made of violence and virtue, power and pride, the life she refused to compromise, and the humanity he'd thought he'd lost forever. Why? Jaiwoo asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Why do you care? Your daughter grabbed my hand, Junseo said. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt human instead of like the monster everyone says I am. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe I'm protecting you because it makes me feel better about the things I've done. But whatever my reasons, I can't walk away. I've tried. I can't. You're still a monster. What you did to those men, the fear in their eyes when they saw you, that's not human. That's not what I want around my daughter. Then I'll stay away. But the protection stays. The men watching your building stay. Whether you accept it or not, you're safe now. You and Hana, that's not negotiable. Jaiwoo closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I don't understand you. I don't understand myself right now. A long silence stretched between them. From inside the apartment, Hana's voice called out, Mummy, is the sad-eyes man still there? Can I say good night? Jaiwoo looked at the door, then back at Junseo. Something in her expression softened fractionally. She talks about you. She drew you a picture. She thinks you're her hero. She's wrong. Is she? Jaiwoo's voice was gentle now, almost wondering. You came when she asked. You stopped those men. You're still here, even though I'm being horrible to you. Maybe she sees something I'm too afraid to see. Or maybe she's a child who doesn't understand what I am. Maybe you don't understand what you could be. The words hit him like a physical blow. What he could be. When had he stopped thinking in those terms? When had he accepted that the monster was all that was left of Kang Jun-seo? The bathroom door opened and Hana emerged, her hair damp, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon characters. She saw Jun-seo and lit up. "You came back. I knew you would. I drew you a picture. Want to see?" Hana Jaiwoo started. "Please, Mummy, just for a minute." Jaiwoo looked at her daughter, then at Jun-seo, and he saw her making a decision that went against every instinct of protection and caution. She sighed. 1 minute, then bedtime. Hana grabbed Jun-seo's hand, that same trusting grip that had started all of this, and pulled him into the apartment. She led him to the table where her crayons were scattered across drawings on recycled paper. She picked up one and held it out proudly. "This is you." The drawing showed a stick figure in black standing in the rain, holding hands with a much smaller stick figure. Above them, Hana had drawn a rainbow despite the rain. At the bottom, in careful letters, she'd written, "My friend who came when I asked." Jun-seo stared at the picture, at this child's interpretation of that night, and felt something crack in the armor he'd built around his heart. In her eyes, he wasn't a monster. He was a friend who came when called, that simple, that pure. "Do you like it?" Hana asked anxiously. "The rainbow isn't right because it was raining, but I thought maybe after you made the bad men leave, it could be rainbow time." "It's perfect." His voice came out rough. "Can I keep it?" Her eyes went wide. "Really, you want to keep it?" "If that's okay with you." She nodded enthusiastically. "I'll make you more. I'll make you a whole collection." "Hana, time for bed." Jaiwoo's voice was strained. The girl pouted but obeyed, giving Jun-seo a quick hug around his legs before running to the futon that served as her bed. Jaiwoo followed, tucking her in, whispering something Jun-seo couldn't hear that made Hana giggle. He stood in the tiny apartment, holding a crayon drawing, feeling more real than he had in 15 years. This was dangerous. This feeling, this connection, this glimpse of what life might have been if he'd made different choices. It was a knife to every defense he'd built. Jaiwoo returned, her expression unreadable. "She likes you. I don't understand it, but she does." "I like her too." "That scares me more than anything. Because liking someone like you, letting her get attached, what happens when she realizes what you are, what you do? Then I'll stay away. I'll protect you from a distance. You'll never see me again. But we'll still be under your shadow. We'll still be, what, your pets, your charity case." "My responsibility." The word felt right. "Let me do this. Let me keep you safe. You don't have to like me. You don't have to thank me. But let me do this one thing right." Jaiwoo studied his face for a long moment. "One condition." "Name it." "If I tell you to leave, you leave. If I say it's too much, that your world is touching ours in ways I can't accept, you walk away and stay away. Deal?" It would kill him, but he nodded. "Deal." "Then, okay for now, but I'm still going to hate this." "Fair enough." He turned to leave, still holding Hana's drawing. "Kang Jun-seo." He looked back. Jaiwoo's expression was conflicted, torn between fear and something that might have been gratitude. "Thank you. I hate that I have to say it, but thank you." He nodded and left before she could see how much those words affected him. The drawing ended up framed on his office wall, the only personal item in a space designed to intimidate and impress. His associates noticed but knew better than to comment. Let them wonder. Let them think it was some kind of psychological tactic. Only Jun-seo knew the truth. It was a reminder that somewhere in this city, a little girl thought he was capable of making rainbows appear after the rain. 2 weeks later, his carefully constructed world began to collapse. It started with a message from an unknown number. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Then you took something that belonged to me. And finally, everything you care about burns." Jun Seo knew immediately who'd sent it. Lee Min-ho, the head of the East Side Brotherhood. The men collecting Jai-woo's debt had been sloppy, but Min-ho himself was anything but. He'd kept quiet for 2 weeks, watching, learning, discovering Jun Seo's unusual interest in a woman with nothing to offer. Finding the weakness, Jun Seo immediately called for enhanced security around the apartment building. 6 men instead of 2, armed, alert. But Min-ho had been planning this for 2 weeks. He'd had time to learn routines, to find patterns, to discover that every Tuesday, Jai-woo took Hana to a free clinic across town for her daughter's asthma medication. The attack came on a Tuesday. Jun Seo was in a meeting when his phone rang. Kim's voice was tight with panic. "Boss, they got her." Time stopped. Who? The woman, Jai-woo. She took a different route to the clinic today. Our men lost sight of her for 40 seconds. That's all it took. We have witnesses saying 3 men in a white van grabbed her off the street. And the girl? At school, safe. We have men there now. Jun Seo was already moving, leaving the meeting without explanation, his associates calling after him in confusion. He pulled out his phone and made calls as he ran to his car. Find that van. Use every camera in the city. Traffic surveillance, private security, everything. I want to know where they took her. His mind was racing through scenarios, each worse than the last. Min-ho wouldn't kill her immediately. This was a message, a demonstration of power. He'd want Jun Seo to suffer first, to know that his attempt at protection had failed. 15 minutes later, Kim called back. "We found the van. It was abandoned in a parking garage in Gangnam, but boss, there's a note." "What does it say?" "Warehouse in Incheon, the old shipping district. He says to come alone. He says if he sees any of your men, he starts cutting pieces off her." Jun Seo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Where's the girl?" "We picked her up from school. She's asking for her mother." "Take her to my apartment, highest security, nobody gets in." "Boss, you can't go alone. This is a trap." "Of course it's a trap. Send men to the perimeter. Tell them to stay back until I signal. But I'm going in alone." Jun Seo. He hung up. The drive to Incheon took 45 minutes through traffic that seemed designed to test his rapidly fraying control. 45 minutes of imagining what Min-ho might be doing, what Jai-woo might be enduring, whether her pride and dignity were keeping her strong or if she was breaking under fear. 45 minutes of hating himself for being right. His protection had made her a target. His interest had painted a bullseye on her back. Everything she'd feared about his world had come true. The warehouse district in Incheon was a graveyard of rust and broken glass, buildings that had been left to decay when the shipping routes moved elsewhere. The address Min-ho had given led to the largest structure, a container warehouse with walls tagged by graffiti and windows long since shattered. Jun Seo parked and got out. He was unarmed. Weapons would be found and taken. His only advantage was that Min-ho wanted him alive long enough to gloat, to demonstrate that even Kang Jun Seo could be made to suffer. The warehouse door stood open. Jun Seo walked through. Inside, the space was vast and shadowy, lit by late afternoon sun filtering through broken panels in the roof. Shipping containers were stacked in haphazard rows, creating a maze of metal corridors. At the far end, in a cleared space, Jun Seo could see lights. He walked forward, his footsteps echoing. When he rounded the last container, he found them. Jai-woo was tied to a chair in the center of the space, duct tape over her mouth, her eyes wide with fear but focused, alert. She had bruises forming on her face, blood at the corner of her mouth, but she was conscious and breathing. Around her stood 5 men, the 3 from her apartment that first night, healed but recognizable, and 2 others, including a man Jun Seo recognized from photographs, Lee Min-ho himself. Min-ho was younger than Jun Seo, maybe 30, with the kind of face that would look gentle if not for the hardness in his eyes. He smiled as Jun Seo approached. The legendary Kang Jun-seo, walking into a trap for a woman he barely knows. How romantic. Jun-seo ignored him, looking at Jai-woo. Her eyes met his and he saw fury there more than fear. Fury at herself for being caught, at him for being right about the danger, at the situation that had brought them to this moment. "Let her go," Jun-seo said simply. "Oh, I will, eventually. But first, we're going to have a conversation about respect, about boundaries, about what happens when you interfere with the East Side Brotherhood's business." This wasn't business. This was three thugs violating territorial agreements. "Details," Min-ho waved a hand dismissively. "The point is, you made me look weak. You canceled a debt that was owed to me. You threatened my men. And then, most interestingly, you put this woman under your protection. Why?" Jun-seo said nothing. "I've been doing research on you, Kang Jun-seo. Quite the fascinating history. Orphaned at 12 after your parents were killed over gambling debts. Younger sister died 3 days later in what the police called an accident. You disappeared into the streets and emerged 15 years later as the most feared man in Seoul." Min-ho walked in a slow circle around Jai-woo's chair. "You know what I found most interesting? No attachments, no relationships, no vulnerabilities, until now." He pulled out a knife and held it near Jai-woo's throat. She didn't flinch, but her eyes closed briefly. "So I asked myself," Min-ho continued, "what could make a man like you suddenly care about some random woman and her kid? And then I saw pictures of the daughter. She's about 7, right? Same age your sister was when she died." Jun-seo's jaw tightened. Min-ho smiled. "That's it, isn't it? The girl reminds you of your dead sister. This isn't about the woman at all. This is about your guilt, your trauma. You couldn't save your sister, so you're trying to save this child instead." Min-ho laughed. "Pathetic. I've built my entire trap on your psychological weakness." "You're wrong." Jun-seo's voice was steady despite the rage building in his chest. "You're right that I couldn't save my sister. You're right that Hana reminded me of her at first. But that's not why I'm here." "No, then why?" "Because I made a choice." Jun-seo looked at Jai-woo, at the woman who'd stood in her hallway and told him she'd rather face monsters alone than accept help from someone like him. "For 15 years, I've let my past dictate my future. I became a monster because monsters killed my family. I built power because I was powerless when it mattered. Every choice I've made has been about that 12-year-old boy who couldn't protect his sister." He looked back at Min-ho. "But this isn't about that boy anymore. This is about the man I choose to be now, and I choose to protect them, not because of guilt or trauma or manipulation, because I want to. Because for the first time in 15 years, someone looked at me and saw something other than a monster." Min-ho's smile faded. "How touching, it won't save her." "Yes, it will, because you made a mistake." "What mistake?" "You assumed I was still operating from weakness, that I was still that traumatized boy making decisions from fear." Jun-seo's voice hardened. "But I'm not weak anymore, Min-ho. I haven't been weak in a very long time. And you're standing in a warehouse surrounded by my territory with a hostage you can't afford to kill." "Can I?" The knife pressed closer to Jai-woo's throat. "No, because if she dies, you lose your leverage. And without leverage, you're just a mid-level boss who kidnaps someone under my protection. There's no negotiation then, no discussion, just war. Is the East Side Brotherhood ready for war with my organization over a woman and a debt you shouldn't have been collecting in my territory anyway?" Min-ho's hand trembled slightly. Behind him, his men shifted nervously. "Here's what's going to happen," Jun-seo continued, his voice dropping to the cold, emotionless tone that had built his reputation. "You're going to let her go. You're going to apologize for the territorial violation. And you're going to go back to Lee and explain that you let personal pride compromise the agreement our organizations have maintained for 2 years. And if I refuse, then you'll never leave this warehouse. Neither will your men. And by morning, the East Side Brotherhood will be at war with every organization I've allied with over the past decade. Is your pride worth that? The standoff stretched, tension thick enough to choke on. Jun Seo could see the calculation in Min-ho's eyes, weighing pride against survival, ego against strategy. Finally, Min-ho lowered the knife. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Jun Seo stepped forward, cut her loose. One of the men moved to comply, slicing through the ropes binding Jai-woo to the chair. She stood on shaky legs, ripping the tape from her mouth. Jun Seo wanted to go to her to help her, but he couldn't show any weakness until they were clear of this place. Jai-woo understood. She walked toward him with her head high, refusing to show fear. When she reached him, he positioned himself between her and Min-ho's men, creating a human shield as they backed toward the exit. Kang Jun Seo, Min-ho called. You think you've won, but you've just proven you have a weakness. That's the kind of information that gets sold to the highest bidder. Jun Seo looked back. Then sell it. Let everyone know that Kang Jun Seo protects this woman and her daughter. Let them know that anyone who touches them answers to me personally. Sometimes a weakness becomes a strength when you stop hiding it. He guided Jai-woo out of the warehouse, expecting attack at any moment. But Min-ho had already lost this confrontation and was too smart to compound his mistake. They made it to the car. Only when the doors were closed and locked did Jun Seo let himself breathe. Hana, Jai-woo said immediately. Where is she? Is she safe? At my apartment. Highest security I have, she's safe. Jai-woo nodded, then her composure cracked. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, the kind of crying that came from hours of controlled terror finally released. Jun Seo sat frozen, unsure what to do, whether touching her would help or make it worse. Finally, he reached out and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. She turned into him, pressing her face against his chest and crying like the world was ending. He wrapped his arms around her and held on, feeling her shake with the force of her fear and relief. You were right, she said when she could speak. About everything. Your world, the danger, all of it. You were right and I was stupid and proud, and now. You were brave, you survived. I could have died. Hana could have lost her mother because I was too stubborn to accept help from a monster. He felt her nod against his chest. You weren't wrong about me, Jai-woo. I am a monster. I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more terrible things before this is over, but I meant what I said back there. I'm choosing to be different with you and Hana. That doesn't make me good. It just makes me less of a monster with you. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes red from crying. Why us? Really, not the speech you gave Min-ho, the truth. The truth? Jun Seo thought about how to explain it. When Hana grabbed my hand that night, I felt something I thought was dead. Hope maybe, or purpose, or just humanness. And when you stood in your hallway and told me you'd rather survive alone than owe me anything, I saw what courage really looks like. Real strength. The kind that doesn't come from power or fear. He reached up and gently wiped tears from her cheek. You asked what I want from you. I want to remember what it feels like to protect instead of destroy, to build instead of tear down, to matter to someone for reasons that have nothing to do with fear. Is that selfish? Probably, but it's the truth. Jai-woo stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. I don't know how to do this, how to accept help from you without losing myself. How to let Hana care about you without worrying about what she'll become. How to trust that you won't wake up one day and realize we're not worth the trouble. I don't know either, he admitted, but maybe we figure it out together. She laughed, sharp and broken. A cleaning woman and a crime boss. That's a fairy tale that ends badly. Or maybe it's one that rewrites the ending. They drove to his apartment in silence. Jai-woo pressed against the window, watching the city pass. When they arrived, his building's security was tight enough to make her eyes widen. You live here. I exist here. Living requires something I haven't done in 15 years. The elevator took them to the top floor. The doors opened directly into his penthouse, a space of glass and steel and carefully curated emptiness. Jaiwoo stepped out and turned in a slow circle, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows with their view of Seoul spread out like a promise, the furniture that cost more than her apartment building, the art on the walls that existed only to fill space. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, "and the loneliest place I've ever seen." Before Jun Seo could respond, a door burst open and Hana came running out, Kim trailing behind her apologetically. "Mummy." Jaiwoo dropped to her knees and caught her daughter, wrapping her up tight. "Hi, baby. I'm here. I'm okay." "The men said you got hurt. They said someone took you. I was so scared." I know, but I'm okay now. Your friend kept me safe." Hana looked over at Jun Seo, her eyes serious. "Did you save my mummy?" "I helped," he said. She detached from Jaiwoo and walked over to him, her small face grave. "Thank you. I prayed you would come and you did." Then she hugged his legs again, the same trusting grip from that first night. Jun Seo looked over her head at Jaiwoo, who was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Mr. Kang," Kim interrupted gently, "we should discuss security arrangements." Jun Seo nodded. "Jaiwoo, there's a bedroom down that hall. You and Hana should rest. We'll talk later about next steps." "Next steps?" "You can't go back to that apartment. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I have safe houses, places where." "We're not living in a safe house like criminals." "Then stay here." The words hung in the air. Kim's eyebrows rose fractionally. Jaiwoo looked around the enormous apartment, clearly overwhelmed. We can't. This place has 4 bedrooms. I use one. The rest are empty. There's security that would take a military operation to breach. Hana would have space to play. You'd be safe. And indebted to you forever. Don't you see how this looks, how this feels? I see a woman and child who need protection, and a man with resources to provide it. Everything else is just details. Hana tugged on his sleeve. "Mummy, I want to stay. Please, it's pretty here, and I can draw pictures on the big table." Jaiwoo looked at her daughter, then at Jun Seo, clearly torn. 1 week. That's all. 1 week while we figure out something else." "Fair enough." Kim escorted them to one of the guest rooms, his expression carefully neutral. When he returned, he found Jun Seo standing at the window, staring out at the city. "Boss, I have to ask, what's the endgame here?" "I don't know." "You always know. You plan everything 5 moves ahead. This is chaos." "I know. They're civilians. They're vulnerable. Every enemy you have will see them as a weakness to exploit." "I know that too." "So what are you doing?" Jun Seo turned from the window. "Something different. For the first time in 15 years, I'm doing something that isn't about power or control or revenge. I'm doing something just because it feels right. Does that make me weaker?" "It makes you human." Kim smiled slightly. "Welcome back, boss. We've missed you." Over the following days, Jun Seo's penthouse transformed. Hana's drawings appeared on the previously bare refrigerator. The kitchen, barely used for anything beyond heating coffee, filled with the smell of Jaiwoo's cooking. The vast emptiness that had defined the space for years filled with the sounds of a child playing, a woman humming while she worked, life happening in spaces designed only for existence. Jun Seo found himself coming home earlier, leaving meetings to make it back before Hana's bedtime. He discovered that the girl had opinions about everything and shared them with enthusiastic detail. He learned that Jaiwoo sang to her daughter every night old songs from Busan that spoke of the sea. He realized that watching them exist in his space didn't make him feel invaded. It made him feel less like a ghost haunting his own life. But the outside world didn't stop, because he decided to be different. 2 weeks after the warehouse incident, Kim brought news. Min-ho's been demoted. Lee Min-ho himself is furious about the territorial violation and the risk to the truce. Min-ho's been stripped of his position. And Min-ho is the type to blame you instead of himself. He's been making noise, talking to people. We're hearing rumors that he's trying to put together something independent, using what he learned about you and the woman. Jun Seo had been expecting this. Men like Min-ho didn't accept defeat, they nursed it until it became obsession. What's he planning? We don't know yet, but boss, maybe it's time to make a decision about the woman and the girl. This could get uglier. Before Jun Seo could respond, Jai-woo appeared in the doorway. She'd been shopping with the credit card he'd given her, insisted she take, and was carrying bags. She looked better than when she'd arrived. The constant fear had faded from her eyes, replaced by something that might have been contentment. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Kim excused himself. Jai-woo came in and set her bags on the couch. Hana wants to know if you'll be home for dinner. She says she has something important to tell you. I'll be here. Good, she hesitated. Can we talk? Of course. She sat down, choosing her words carefully. I've been thinking about what you said, about figuring this out together, and I've realized something. What? I'm tired of being afraid, tired of running, tired of surviving instead of living. She looked at him directly. These 2 weeks here have been the first time in 3 years that I haven't gone to bed worried about whether we'd have enough food the next day. The first time Hana's asked for a toy and I could say yes. The first time I've felt safe. But I can't keep living in your apartment like some kind of kept woman. People will talk. Already your staff looks at me weird. And what about Hana? What does she learn from this arrangement? What do you want to do? She stopped, started again. I want to work, really work, not just cleaning buildings. I want to contribute. I want to find my own place eventually, something modest but ours. I want Hana to go to a good school. I want us to build a real life, not just hide in your shadow. Done. What? Whatever you need. A job, I have legitimate businesses. You pick which one interests you, I'll make it happen. An apartment, there's a building I own in a good neighborhood. It's safe, it's near good schools. You can have a unit there, pay whatever rent you can afford. When you can afford more, pay more. Jai-woo shook her head. You don't understand. I'm trying to not be dependent on you. And I'm trying to help someone I care about build the life they deserve. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You care about me. The question hung between them. Jun Seo realized with some shock that it was true. Somewhere between the warehouse and the dinners and the quiet moments watching her teach Hana to read, care had evolved into something deeper. Yes, he said simply, I care about you, both of you. Jai-woo stood and walked to the window, her back to him. I was married young, to a man who seemed good but turned out weak, who ran when things got hard and left me to face his mistakes. I promised myself I'd never depend on a man again, never let someone have that kind of power over me. She turned back. But you're not asking for power over me, are you? You're just offering help, and I'm having trouble telling the difference. Jun Seo stood and crossed to her. The difference is choice. If you want to work, work. If you want your own place, take it. If you wake up tomorrow and decide you want nothing to do with me, I'll make sure you and Hana stay safe, but I'll stay away. You have all the power here, Jai-woo, not me. That's not true. You're still Kang Jun Seo. You're still dangerous. You still live in a world where men get kidnapped to send messages. I know, and if you want to walk away from that world, I understand. But if you stay, he reached out and gently took her hand. If you stay, I promise I'll do everything I can to keep that world from touching you. She looked down at their joined hands. This is insane. You know that, right? A crime boss and a cleaning woman, it's not a romance novel. It's a tragedy waiting to happen. Maybe, or maybe it's the start of something neither of us expected. Jai-woo laughed, the sound breaking on a sob. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, but we have time to figure it out. She leaned forward until her forehead rested against his chest. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if this gets too dangerous, if your world starts destroying ours, you'll let us go. You won't try to hold on. You'll let Hana and me have a normal life, even if it's without you. The promise would kill him, but looking down at her, feeling her trust despite all her fears, Junsi knew he'd make any promise she asked. I promise. That night, Hana's important announcement at dinner turned out to be that she'd learned all the words to a new song at school. She sang it for them, slightly off-key, with dramatic hand gestures. Jaiwoo laughed and applauded, and Junsi, sitting at the head of a table that had never held family before, felt something shift in his chest that might have been happiness. Later, after Hana was in bed, Jaiwoo found him on the balcony overlooking the city. She stood beside him in comfortable silence for a moment before speaking. Kim told me about Min-ho, that he's planning something. Jun-seo wasn't surprised his second-in-command had talked to her. He's wounded and dangerous, a bad combination. Should we leave, go somewhere he can't find us? Running won't solve this. Then what will? Jun-seo looked at her. Trust me to handle it, can you do that? Can you promise me it won't end with you dead or in prison? No, but I can promise I'll do everything possible to come back to you and Hana. Jaiwoo was quiet for a long moment, then she took his hand. Then I trust you, God help me, I trust you. They stood together in the darkness, looking out at Seoul's lights, both knowing that the peace they'd found was temporary. Min-ho was planning something. Other enemies were watching. The world Jun-seo had built with violence and fear wouldn't let him walk away into domesticity without a fight. But for this moment, with Jaiwoo's hand in his and Hana safe asleep inside, Jun-seo allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than the monster everyone said he was. The attack, when it came, was elegant in its cruelty. Min-ho had spent weeks learning routines. He knew that every Tuesday, Jun-seo's men escorted Jaiwoo to the community center where she'd started volunteering. He knew the route. He knew the timing. He knew that for 45 seconds between leaving the parking garage and entering the building, Jaiwoo was exposed. But Min-ho had learned from his mistakes. He didn't try to take Jaiwoo again. This time, he went for the real weakness. He went for Hana. It happened at school during afternoon recess. The security Jun-seo had placed was extensive, but even the best security had moments of distraction. A fire alarm pulled from across the campus. Guards moving toward the perceived threat. 45 seconds of chaos. That's all it took. When the alarm was proven false and the guards returned to their positions, Hana was gone. Jun-seo was in a meeting when his phone rang. He saw Kim's number and knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. Kim never called during meetings. Talk. They took the girl. The world stopped. Around the table, his associates continued discussing numbers, territories, percentages. Their voices became white noise. Jun-seo stood without explanation and walked out. How long? His voice was eerily calm. 12 minutes. We've locked down the school. Traffic cameras show a blue sedan leaving 3 minutes after the alarm. We're tracking it now. Where's Jaiwoo? At the community center. We haven't told her yet. Not until I have the girl back. Where's the car heading? North, toward the old industrial district. Jun-seo was already moving toward his car. How many men can you get to that area in 10 minutes? 20, maybe 30. Do it, but tell them to hold position. I want to know where they're taking her before we move. He drove like a man possessed, the city blurring past. His mind was ice cold, calculating, focused. Emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford. If he let himself think about Hana's face when they took her, her fear, the way she'd trusted him to keep her safe. He couldn't think about that, not now. Kim called back 6 minutes later. We have a location, abandoned factory in the northern district. The car's parked outside. Thermal imaging shows 5 heat signatures inside, 4 adults, 1 child-sized. I'm 8 minutes out. Boss, you can't go in alone again. This is different. This is Min-ho making a point. He'll kill the girl to hurt you. Then he dies. Have our men surround the building. On my signal they come in hard, full force. I don't care about collateral damage. Boss. Those are my orders. Follow them. 7 minutes later, Jun Seo pulled up to the abandoned factory. It had once produced electronics. Now it produced only rust and shadows. His men were already in position, invisible in the darkness, waiting for his command. He walked to the main entrance alone. No weapons, no backup, just him and the absolute certainty that if Min-ho hurt Hana, no power in heaven or earth would stop what came next. The factory's main floor was cavernous, filled with broken assembly lines and shattered windows. In the center, under flickering emergency lights that somehow still worked, Min-ho waited. Hana sat on the floor beside him, her hands zip-tied in front of her. She wasn't crying. Her small face was set in an expression of fierce determination that broke Jun Seo's heart even as it made him proud. When she saw him, her eyes widened. I knew you'd come. I told them you'd come. Min-ho smiled. She did, quite insistent about it, said you were her friend and friends don't abandon each other. He pulled out a gun and pressed it against Hana's head. Let's test that theory. Jun Seo stopped walking, every muscle in his body screaming to attack. Let her go. Why would I do that? She's my leverage, my insurance policy. You took my position, my reputation, my future. Now I take what you care about. She's a child. So was your sister. Did that stop the men who killed her? Hana looked up at Min-ho, her voice small but steady. You're a bad man. Min-ho laughed. Yes, I am. Thanks to your friend here, he's the one who made me lose everything. This is his fault. No, Hana's voice was stronger now. You're bad because you choose to be. He chooses to be good sometimes. That's why we're friends. The simple statement hit Jun Seo harder than any blow. She still believed in him. Even here, with a gun to her head, she believed he was good. Touching, Min-ho's voice hardened. Here's what's going to happen, Kang Jun Seo. You're going to kneel. You're going to beg for her life. And then I'm going to decide whether your begging is sincere enough to spare her. Or, Jun Seo said quietly, you could let her go and we settle this between us, man to man. Why would I give up my advantage? Because using a child as leverage makes you weak. It makes you the kind of man who can't win on his own terms. Is that really how you want to be remembered? As the coward who hid behind a little girl? Min-ho's face flushed. I'm not a coward. Then prove it. Let her go. Fight me yourself. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm giving you a chance to reclaim your pride. You lost your position because you made stupid decisions. You can lose what's left of your reputation by killing a child, or you can face me like a man and maybe come out of this with some dignity intact. The gun trembled against Hana's head. Jun Seo could see Min-ho calculating, weighing options, his ego warring with his survival instinct. Please, Hana said quietly. Please don't hurt me. I'm only 7. I haven't even grown up yet. Something in her voice, the simple plea from a child who shouldn't be here, shouldn't be facing death because of adult conflicts, seemed to reach through Min-ho's rage. The gun lowered fractionally. If I let her go, Min-ho said, you'll kill me. Probably, but you'll die with your dignity, as a man who faced his enemy instead of hiding behind a child. Min-ho looked at Hana, at Jun Seo, at the situation he'd created that had spiraled beyond his control. Finally, he lowered the gun completely and cut the zip ties around Hana's wrists. Run to him quickly. Hana didn't hesitate. She ran across the factory floor and threw herself into Jun Seo's arms. He caught her, holding her tight, feeling her small body shake with delayed fear. You came, she whispered against his neck. I knew you would. Always, he whispered back. I'll always come for you. He looked at Min-ho over Hana's head. The other man stood alone in the circle of light, his gun hanging loose in his hand, looking suddenly young and tired and lost. I didn't want this, Min-ho said. I just wanted respect, power to matter. I know, I wanted the same things at your age. Did you find them? Jun-seo looked down at Hana, then back at Min-ho. I found something better. It took 15 years and the courage of a little girl, but I found something better. Min-ho raised his gun, pointing it at Jun-seo. I still have to try. I know. The shot never came. From the shadows, Jun-seo's men emerged, 20, 30, more, surrounding the space. Min-ho's remaining associates scattered, running for exits that were already blocked. Min-ho looked around at the overwhelming force and lowered his weapon. It's over, Jun-seo said. You can walk away from this. Leave Seoul, start over somewhere else, or you can fight and die here, your choice. Min-ho stared at him for a long moment, then he dropped the gun. I'm tired of fighting. Kim stepped forward and took Min-ho into custody. Jun-seo carried Hana out of the factory, into the night air that smelled of rain and new beginnings. Are you okay? He asked her. She nodded against his shoulder. I wasn't scared, not really, because I knew you'd save me. That was very brave. Not brave, I just believed in my friend. He carried her to his car. Kim approached as he was buckling her in. What do you want done with Min-ho? Jun-seo looked at Hana, who was watching him with those two wise eyes. What would she think if he ordered Min-ho killed? What would it teach her about who he really was? Let him go, put him on a bus out of Seoul, make it clear he's never welcome back, but let him live. Kim's eyebrows rose. Boss. Those are my orders. After Kim left, Hana spoke up. That was the right choice. Was it? Mummy says everyone deserves a second chance, even bad people. Jun-seo smiled despite everything. Your mother is a wise woman. Are you going to marry her? The question was so unexpected that Jun-seo actually laughed. What makes you ask that? Because you look at her the way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my book, and she looks at you the same way when you're not watching. Does she? Hana nodded seriously. Also, I need a daddy. My first daddy left, but you're better anyway. You keep your promises. Jun-seo had to pull the car over because his vision was suddenly blurred. He gripped the steering wheel, fighting for control, overwhelmed by the simple faith of a child who decided he was worthy of being her father. I'd be honored, he managed to say, if your mother agrees. She will. Grown-ups always pretend to be unsure about things, but I can tell she loves you. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When they arrived at the penthouse, Jae-woo was waiting in the lobby, Kim having finally called to tell her what happened. She ran to them as they got out of the car, pulling Hana into her arms with desperate relief. Baby, are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, Mummy. The bad man wasn't so bad in the end, and my friend saved me just like I knew he would. Jae-woo looked up at Jun-seo over Hana's head, her eyes filled with tears and gratitude and something that might have been love. Thank you. Always. They went upstairs together. Hana, exhausted from her ordeal, fell asleep almost immediately. Jae-woo sat beside her bed for a long time just watching her breathe. Jun-seo found her there an hour later. You should rest too. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see what could have happened, what almost happened. But didn't. She's safe. This time. What about next time? What about all the next times because I chose to be with someone whose enemies use children as weapons? There won't be a next time. I'm making changes. Jae-woo looked up at him. What kind of changes? The kind that means stepping back from active operations, putting legitimate people in charge of my legitimate businesses and legitimate people only, maintaining oversight of the less legitimate operations from a distance, building walls between my family and my work. Your family. He knelt beside her. If you'll have me, both of you, I know I'm not the man you would have chosen. I know my past is violent and my future uncertain. But I love you, Jaiwoo. I love your daughter. I want to build something real with you, something that isn't about power or fear or survival. I want to be the man you and Hana deserve. She searched his face, looking for doubt or deception. What if you can't change? What if the monster is all there is? Then you'll leave, like you said, and I'll let you go like I promised, but I have to try. For the first time in 15 years, I have something worth changing for. Jaiwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, gentle and tentative and full of possibility. Okay, she whispered against his lips. We'll try together. 6 months later, Junseo stood in a small garden outside a modest house in a quiet Seoul neighborhood. Inside, he could hear Jaiwoo singing to Hana, the same old songs from Busan that spoke of the sea. His men maintained security from a distance, invisible but present. His businesses ran smoothly under new management that didn't require his daily involvement. He'd kept his promises. The legitimate operations thrived. The less legitimate ones were gradually being phased out or handed over to people who wanted that life. He was building something new, a legacy that wouldn't be written in violence and fear. Hana ran out into the garden, her drawing pad in hand. Look, I drew us. The picture showed 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one labeled Daddy, a medium one labeled Mummy, and a small one labeled Hana. Above them, she'd drawn a rainbow. It's perfect, Junseo said, meaning it. I know, the rainbow is because you keep making the rain go away. Jaiwoo appeared in the doorway, her hands flour-covered from baking. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Hana, wash up. Okay, Mummy. The girl skipped inside, already chattering about something that happened at her new school. Jaiwoo walked over to Junseo and slipped her hand into his. You're different, she said quietly. From the man I met in the rain, lighter somehow. You gave me something to be different for. No, you chose to be different. We just gave you a reason to choose. They stood together in the garden, watching the sunset paint Seoul in shades of gold and amber. Junseo knew his past would never fully release him. Knew there would be challenges ahead, old enemies emerging, new threats forming. But for the first time in 15 years, he faced the future without the weight of inevitability. He'd been the monster. He'd been the feared one, the untouchable one, the man whose name alone could silence a room. But a little girl had grabbed his hand in the rain and asked for help, and in that moment, everything had changed. She'd seen past the monster to the man underneath. She'd believed he was capable of being someone better. And because she'd believed, he'd become it. The rain started to fall, soft and gentle, cleansing. Hana ran back outside, her arms spread wide to catch drops on her tongue. Jaiwoo laughed and pulled Junseo into the rain with her. And there, in a garden in a quiet neighborhood far from the empire he'd built on blood and fear, Kang Junseo finally learned what it meant to live instead of just survive. The monster was still there. It always would be, but it no longer defined him. He was a father now, a partner, a man who'd found redemption not through grand gestures or sacrificial acts, but through the simple choice to be present, to protect, to love. And in the eyes of a little girl who'd never stopped believing in him, he saw not what he'd been, but what he'd become. That was enough. If you enjoyed this story of transformation and redemption, please subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives that explore the power of choice and change. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts about Junseo's journey. What would you have done in his position? And don't forget to like this video to help others discover this tale of monsters and the humans who save them. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to life. Thank you for watching.